Okay, good morning everyone. So this is the presentation and the lecture video prepared for the reading week 2024 fourth semester. This video will serve as additional material you can use for the reading week. So you can know the sociological findings. So the sociology. So in the classical sociology, suicide was one of the large topic of the classical leader of the theorist, Emile Durkheim. So I will show you what are some kind of the prevention strategy at the cognitive level. So the religion will serve as a protector. So that will protect the people from the suicidal thoughts or other issues. So I will show you how the religion and religiosity will work as a protective factor in the cognitive level. All right, and let me start. So, as the suicide is a very sensitive topic. So I wanna share the trigger warning in case you are having some of the issues with the mental health or others, because if you have any experience of the suicidal thoughts or have a history of the PTSD or the trauma or any of the issues, please proceed with the best level of caution, but you can stop watching immediately. So if you have any issues about the related with the suicidal thoughts or others, if you feel uncomfortable with that, please stop watching this video now and email me so that I can direct you to the alternative format of other types of the assignments. So please feel free to let me know if you are not comfortable with this, and if you don't want to go to the there is no violent images or something, but if that is the trigger effect or triggering item for you, you can stop now and you can quit this video and just email me so that I can assign you another type of the easy type of assignment. So your well-being comes first. So even though this video is prepared for the cognitive level of the protection for the suicidal behavior or thoughts, but if you have the animal triggers, please just stop watching this video, and I will let you know what are some possible on the alternative exams. Well, no, sorry about that. Alternative assignments. So this is one of my projects. So many of my projects are about their perception. So homosexuality, which is published in the Social Science Research last year, this year. So based on their age, their acceptance of the homosexuality is differentiated. And the death penalty, which is the criminology topic. So based on the trust, or that there's a trust to others, which means they are thinking that, they can trust some people. So cannot trust others means that they do not perceive others are very trustworthy people. The red color means people say that they can trust others in general. This is a political orientation, which means the left-hand side is the left wing, the right-hand side is the right wing, more the conservative and more liberal. And this number, the y-axis means that more predictive level of the acceptance of the death penalty, which means higher number or the higher graph means that they are more likely to accept or agree about the death penalty if needed. So you can see that. So on the more conservative people, they are more likely to accept the death penalty as a punishment. But based on the trust, so those who are trust others, they would have the lower level of the acceptance of the death penalty compared to the people who do not trust others. So those who are trusting others, they would have some more flexible or more generous the feelings about the others, and they would provide more generosity in their types of the punishment. And this is the type of the graph showing that x-axis means that those who are more religious people, those who are thinking that religion is more important in their life, one means no, religion is not very important. Their religion is not very, the God is not important like that. The 4 means the higher religiosity, which means they think that the religion is very, very important. The God is very important. The Bible is very important like that. So if they believe their religion more seriously, they would have the lower level of acceptance of the suicide. But other religions would have the very similar level, but the Protestant, the Christians, the Protestant, or the church believers, compared with the Buddhist and the Catholic believers and the non-religion people, those who are more religious, they are super less likely, much less likely to accept the suicide, which means they reject. The more religious people are rejecting or thinking about the suicide. However, if they are not very religious, they are very likely to accept the suicide, because they would think that they are rejected from the God, and they do not believe that authoritarian, the church, and the Bible, and the biblical findings are not very real. So they would have not kind of the control to think that they should be out of the sin, or they're out of the acceptance of the suicide. So these are the series of my findings of the acceptance of the special issues, but I will focus on how the religion and religiosity will impact on the acceptance of the suicide. So now we are living in Arkansas, right? So we are in the Arkansas State University, and Arkansas is one of a Bible Belt in the U.S. So the definition of the Bible Belt is the southern regions and many of the states which has strong Christianity influences. So that include the Protestantism or the Catholic believers. So social and the political life is heavily impacted by the Protestant and Catholic Christianity, especially the evangelical and very evangelical and the conservative denominations. So there are very wide variety of the spectrum in their denominations. So some denominations may have the different levels of understanding about the social issues like abortion, suicide, and homosexuality. But in the southern part of the Bible Belt in the U.S., we would believe that there are the high levels of the integrity in the evangelical beliefs. So high religious service attendance. So in Jonesboro, you can see that there are so many churches in Arkansas, in Tennessee, in many of the states. So if you travel other states, you may not see that number of the churches or the Catholic churches, but in this area, there are so many number of the religious service and the chambers and the service places. So people in this region tend to go to church more often than other parts in the U.S. And conservative values which emphasize traditional and the socially conservative values shared by the religious belief. So this is the main characteristic of the Bible Belt in the United States. So this is very rough on the comparison. So the dimmer, the lighter color means the the lower number of the standardized number of the suicide, which means there are probably the 100,000 people, and if there are the lower rates of the suicide, these are the lighter numbers and lighter colors. But the darker color means there are higher age-adjusted death rates, which means the suicidal death rates. So we can see that the darker color, these are the Bible Belt, but relatively, so compared with the other states in the northern part or the western part, they would have the lower suicide rate, but this is not all uniformly applied, because some of the states in the Bible Belt, the Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, in these areas, they would have some relatively higher suicide rate compared with the East Coast. So let's see. So we want to test. Probably the religion might be the protective factor, but we don't know how much and which direction they are involved in that. So coming to another country in South Korea, the suicide is a very huge topic because the fertility rate is very low, which means there are not many new incoming babies and non-incoming people, the new challengers, and there are the low rate of the marriages, and most of the child births in South Korea, these are happening within the former marriages. So the babies or the baby births out of wedlock, these are not very prevalent in South Korea. So the aging society, which means that the more older the couples, they may not have the the reproduction or reproductivity because of the aging process in the biology. So that's why the Korea is dying out, and then there are very high suicide rate compared with all of the OECD or the very highly developed countries, and there are very high levels of the variation. The older people are dying more and more by the suicide, even though there are the decreasing pattern of the suicide, but still there are many risks of the suicide in South Korea. So this is the protection. So any kind of the psychological factors, and in case, in any timing of in your life, if you think, so if you have some impulse of the suicide, that's a time to go to see a counselor, because this is the early stage. So the suicidal behavior is believed to have the continuum behavior process, which means the completed suicide would happen from the suicidal attempt, and suicidal attempt would happen from the suicidal ideation, which means they would consider thinking about the committing suicide, and then they would try to find some ways of the suicidal behavior, and then if they make the successful suicidal behavior, that will lead into suicide. So that's why this is a chain of the events, and if there are the higher risks in the previous stages, it means that the risks of the suicidal behavior will be increasing more and more, and that will lead into higher risks of the suicide. So the suicidal prevention is very important, because, as I mentioned just before, the blocking the processes in the earlier stages will help individuals in the risk a lot. So for example, if they have the lower levels of the suicidal ideation, because of the mental health promotion events and many of the campaigns in the community, suicide help outline, community-based engagement to make the more cohesive groups, and effective patient transport system, that will lower down the risks of the chain of the events, which means the lower risk in the previous stages, the less the likelihood of the risks in the next stages of the suicidal behavior. So that's why in any time of your life, so in case you are feeling any of the bad thoughts or some kind of the thoughts of the giving up the life like that, please contact the counselor or your advisor, and even me, so your instructor, so that we can provide the support for you. So we are here for you, and not only for your academic resources, but also to protect you in the community, as a group of the individuals in the academic community. So whenever you have any of the risks encountered in any of the stages in the behavior or self-harming behavior, please call 988 or contact your advisor, your family, your church members, your religious members, your friends, anyone, because you need to have the help. You need to ask for the help, and you need to have the help. So this is what I said, the cognitive opponent process, which means some types of the sensitization or the protection, which means there were the multiple stages. So there are the competing process, which means accelerating on this process, or the blocking or the seizing the process. So someone may have the suicidal ideation, but if they just stop here completely, formally and forever, that will not lead into suicidal attempts or the completed suicide. But if there are some of the factors accelerating on this procedure, they will make the bad, very negative outcomes. So there are also the biological factors, the biological gene or the serotonin or serotonin, but this is not our focus. So how to seize the process, how to block or how to prevent the acceleration of this process will be very helpful for the protection. So one of the way, or one of the interpretation of the cognitive protection behavior is acceptance of the suicide, because if the individuals are more open to the suicide, such as they accept more suicide, they think the suicide is fine like that, they are more likely. If they justify the suicide more, they are more likely to think about the suicide or consider themselves to go to the suicide. And religion and acceptance suicide, usually those who have the religion, they would have the lower levels of the acceptance of the suicide. And especially within the religion, Protestants are more and more likely to disapprove, or Protestants are very less likely to accept the suicide. So because in the evangelical Bible and many of the findings, they would believe that the suicide is a sin in the Bible. So that's why they don't have the very wide acceptance of the suicide, and they would keep away from them, they would keep them away from the suicide. So maybe United States in South Korea, they were the brothers country, because many of the evangelical leaders from the U.S. They came to the South Korea to follow them, to make them as the Christians following that. So based on the historical growth, they combined with the evangelical leaders from the United States and the political powers. They also used the organization of the churches, because they wanted to co-align with the Christianity, because the Christianity from the US, they were confronting the communism like Russia or the North Korea or others. So the social movements, the evangelical leaders and the churches, they became very powerful because they got support from the political leaders, because they all assigned well with the alignments in their object. So conservative stance in the many of the social beliefs, so not only in the suicide, but also, as I mentioned briefly about that, homosexuality and abortion, they all aligned with the very conservative family values and in society. So in these analysis, so in their findings, I try to measure how the religion and religiosity impact on the acceptance of the suicide, because we may believe that those who have the religion, or those who are the Protestants or any other religions, they would be less likely to accept the suicide. And Protestantism or Protestants, they would have the lower levels of the acceptance of the suicide, because in the Bible there is very clear distinction that the suicide is very not very well regarded in their biblical the findings and the beliefs. And those who are more religious people, for example, if they think that religion is very important, the God is very important, if they attend the church more and more, they are less likely to think about suicide, or they are less likely to accept the suicide. So these are well aligned with the previous findings, and logically, more religion and the more religiosity that will lead into the lower levels of the acceptance of the suicide, which means lower levels of the acceptance of suicide will be related with the lower risk of the thinking about suicide or the later processes. So that's why I'm thinking that the religion and religiosity will serve as the cognitive protection from the risks of the suicide. So you can skim this part, because I'm using the 5 waves of the quantitative data, the name is the World Value Survey. The case size is 5,900, and based on this descriptive table. So in sociology or in many of the social sciences, we use the descriptive statistics, showing that the bar graph. So based on their religion, these are the number of the acceptance of the suicide. The lower number means the least level of acceptance of suicide. Number 10 means the higher acceptance of the suicide. So as you well imagined, the no religion, those who don't have any religion now in that point of time, they are the more likely to accept the suicide compared with the Buddhist and the Catholic and the Protestants. And as you could see, the Protestants would have the lower, much lower level of the acceptance of the suicide, even compared with the Catholic and the Buddhist. So usually in Buddhism, they don't think the dying or the killing is very good, but they would have more permissive understanding about that, because they would believe in the incarceration. So if they die by the suicide, they may go into the lower level of the lower tier animal in the incarceration, but anyway, they are more permissive compared with other religions. The Catholic is in middle, but there are the lower levels of the acceptance of suicide than the Buddhism and no religion, but more acceptance of the suicide, the Protestants. So these are the models, but we get controls. So which means, so everyone, if they have the same level of the age and the same gender, if they have the same religious affiliation and education level, we are trying to see how they think about the suicide. So this is the another method. So this is out of our progress, so you don't need to watch it over. But we can see that. So you can see that in the descriptive statistics, is just suicide agreeable or justifiable? Only about 48%. About 48% of people, they said no, we can never justify the suicide. And there are very lower number of the cases they think the suicide is very largely acceptable or justifiable. But anyway, we can see that. So this is the most important one finding. So the lower number means the less levels of the religiosity. So they said the religion is not very important. And if you go to the large number, they are saying that religion is very, very important. All right. So as they believe that religion is very important, they would have that. This is the acceptance of the suicide. Higher number means the more acceptance of suicide, and the lower number means the less level of the acceptance of suicide. Which means, so that line is the Protestants, and you can see that very, very steep decrease of the acceptance of the suicide if they believe in their religion more and more, right? So this is very steep compared with the no religion people, not really make the differentiation. This is the Catholic. They would have the declines of the trends, but not very steep like a Protestant. And the Buddhist, not very early. And importance of the God, which means the lower number means that God is not very important. 10 is the God is very, very important. You can see that very steep decrease of the acceptance of the suicide if they believe the God is very important. And then the Catholic, the less likely to be very steep. And even the no-religion people and the Buddhists, they don't think that that's very important. So based on this research, anyway, the more religious people, the more religious Protestants, they are super less likely to accept the suicide, which means those who are more religious, they are protected more and more because they would have the lower levels of the acceptance of the suicide. So religiosity explains a lot, but paradoxically, so if they are Protestants, they should have the lower level of acceptance of the suicide. However, if they are not very serious, in the Protestant, which say the religion is not very important, God is not important, they are even more accepting the suicide as their attitude. So that will explain the less religious Protestants are experiencing disconnection or the separation or from their culture and the biblical findings and the beliefs. So they would have the lower control or lower protection compared with the highly religious believers, because they would feel that the relative deprivation compared with their past when they were very religious or other religious people in the community. So Protestants are least accepting in the suicide in South Korea, may have the highest cognitive protection from the thinking about suicide. Unlike other religious affiliations, religiosity played the explained association between religion and acceptance of the suicide in South Korea. And religious Protestants could be the most protected people, and then suicide behaviors by seizing their process of the risky behaviors. However, most religious Protestants will have the most stigmatizing attitude toward the suicidal behaviors, so they may not accept any of the bereavement families who have the family members who commit suicide. So that will be a kind of issue we can think about that. So again, so religiosity, the religion could provide a cognitive buffer, because the more religious people having the religion, they will be associated with the lower levels of the acceptance of the suicide, and the lower levels of the acceptance of suicide will lead into the less likelihood of thinking about suicide and attempting suicide. And so based on that findings, the faith-based community and the counseling, and these will be very helpful. So especially as we are living in the Bible Belt in the United States, we have many of the churches and the Protestant churches and the Catholic churches, and those communities can serve and provide the good of the safety net if there are some of the people who are isolated or if they are endangered in the risk of the suicide. Alright, so this is the end of the short lecture video, and there will be some of the very easy questions you would answer. Alright, so after watching this video, and please answer those questions. Thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next lecture or in the class. Thank you very much.